Hi, I'm Ernie Zorn, and I'm the voice of this Puritas Spring software video. It's another in a series of demonstration videos totaling about 20, which coincidentally is the same number of fax videos that we've published. Cumulatively, we've logged over 15,000 views, and for that we're very grateful to you for taking time out of your busy law office day to watch. With that introduction, let's get started on what's new in the Spousal Support Calculator for 2020. Right off the bat, you'll look at the screen and think, hey, what happened to the toolbar buttons? What's with the alphabet buttons? Well, here's the deal. You don't need to memorize anything anymore, because if you let your cursor drift over the button for only a second, I'll do that right now. Where is my cursor? There it is. See, as soon as you put it over a button, a hint pops up and tells you exactly what that button does. You'll probably accidentally memorize them the first time you use them anyway. O for open, S for save. It's pretty intuitive. Now here's something I'm not sure we ever mentioned before, and I suspect its usefulness depends on the client. I'm talking about the client worksheet. Now some clients don't mind filling out forms, and other clients think that, hey, that's what they're paying you to do. If your client's in this first group, you'll be interested in the client information worksheet, which you can print and copy, and here's how you do it. It's pretty easy. I just go up to the Help menu, PDF Resources, and down at, nope, not down at the bottom. At the top, here's the client information worksheet. I click on that, and what will open up in my Adobe is a PDF of a client information worksheet, which can be filled out by the client. Once it's completed by the client, you or your assistant can start the client file by completing the general information worksheet. If you have the client attach last year's tax return, you're practically all set. You don't need any specialized legal knowledge to perform the data entry, so you're really good to go. Now, while I'm on the subject of the general information worksheet, make sure to complete the children's section at the bottom. I'll scroll down there in its entirety. Well, at least make sure that you complete the name, birth date, and dependent fields. That way you'll be sure that your tax computation is correct. And you may ask yourself why the dependency checkbox is so important, because there is no dependency exemption any longer under federal tax law, and that's correct. But remember that dependents are still important for determining filing status, eligibility for the child tax credit, the child care credit, the earned income credit, and maybe even a few other things that I'm not remembering right now. The point is, those three pieces of information are important to the spousal support calculator, so make sure you complete them as a bare minimum. Now, I haven't received the question in years, but I used to be asked why the support amount changed by a couple of bucks after hitting the refresh button a few times. By the way, the refresh button is up here. It's the R button. The reason this happens, for simplicity's sake, the spousal support calculator deals in whole dollars. No cents, it rounds all amounts. And the IRS, for example, well, they prefer it that way. Well, rounding is great for the spousal support calculator because it's easier to read until you get to the personal and living expense worksheet, which is where I'm going to go now. And for convenience of data entry, it allows you to switch between monthly and yearly, annual, or between monthly and annual screens. There's a button up here. It's M, monthly. That'll change it to monthly. Now the button would change it to yearly. It says it's monthly over here in the caption. But the reason we have it that way is, let's say you happen to know that the automobile insurance is $1,750 per year. Well, you can switch the worksheet to annual, which is what it is right now, and enter that amount directly in without dividing by 12 to figure out what the monthly amount is. Likewise, if your cell phone bill is the same every month, and you don't want to multiply the monthly amount by 12 to get the annual figure, I can click on the monthly button. That switches my sheet to monthly expenses, and I can enter in the monthly cell phone bill. So The ability to enter data either monthly or yearly, it's fantastic for speeding up data entry, but it comes with a small side effect because when you're rounding amounts, the amounts themselves can do some morphing. And here's here's a simple example. If let's get on the annual screen, and I'm going to enter an expense in as $16 a year. Wow, this would not be realistic for me to do that in gasoline, but yeah, that's what I'm going to do. That's how much I spend in gasoline a year. Now, if I switch to monthly, because it's rounding off, that changes it to $1. And if I change back to yearly along the way, we see that original $16 amount is now $12. So you can get very tiny changes, and you can only get these small errors, by the way, on the personal and living expense worksheet, because that's the only one that switches between monthly and yearly. And I think you can see that the maximum effect it would have on living expense is probably about $5 up or down. So it shouldn't really be a big deal. And if the notion of being off like that rubs you the wrong way, you could leave the personal and living expense screen set to annual, the default setting, and don't change between monthly and yearly views, because that's where the rounding does its dirty work, is when you change between views. Let's move on to I know what it is, the taxable, non-taxable button up here. When the annual version of Spousal Support Calculator was first published like 20 years ago, it used available tax forms and publications that apply to the year just ending, because that's when they're published. So let's say the 2019 information from the IRS is published around December of 2019. As the next year progresses, the IRS publishes new tax data for the upcoming tax year. And so we had right where the taxable, non-taxable button is, and what it would allow you to do is switch between the current year and the year and the tax year that was just finished, where you've got all the information. Now, that was okay. In 2019, when the taxable treatment of alimony changed, it became more important to be able to change between pre-2019 treatment and present-day treatment. This is especially true when you're working with pre-2019 orders that are being modified under the new law after 2018. Those orders are going to continue to be using the old tax treatment, I think, unless the modification expressly provides otherwise. So this button up here, this taxable, non-taxable button, takes on an increased importance, because this is the button that lets you jump back and forth between making spousal support payments taxable and non-taxable. And when you think back, the old functionality of flipping back and forth between the two tax years, it usually didn't really mean a whole lot in terms of the bottom line, number one. And number two, you typically want to use the latest tax forms and rules anyway, so I think this is a much better implementation to have that as a taxable, non-taxable button. Okay, I'm going to move on to overriding. Yeah, overriding is not a new feature, but I regularly come across users who aren't quite sure how it works, and I'll take a second here to explain. I'm going to open up the CLE sample. Wait a minute. I opened it up. I'm not sure what I did there. Let's see what happens. There we go. I did. I opened it up, the sample file. And you'll see at the top, there is a spousal support. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but spousal support is $24,172 a year. And it's right there at the top. Well, just to show you about overriding, I can click on the Set Spousal Support button here, which will take me to the Set Spousal Support screen. And I can go down here to the blue field and override it, as I do right now. And wow, that was hard enough. Okay. I think I clicked in the wrong place or something. But anyway, in the example that I was going to give you, I wanted to make spousal support 0 so I can take a look at some other things. And the whole point of it was to show you about overriding. And so I got into the field, which I don't think I did that correctly the first time I clicked. And then I clicked on the O button up here, which is now a slash button. And that turned it red. And that red means that I can type in something. So if I wanted to get spousal support out of the equation temporarily, I could just type a 0 in there. Now, spousal support is 0. And I can go about checking my income tax calculations or the child support calculation without considering what spousal support is. Incidentally, let's say that I did my checking and I thought, okay, I'm done. I've got all the information I want. I can just go back to that field right there, and it's now the O button, which was for overriding, is now the cancel button for canceling it. And so I click on the cancel button. There it is. You know, I had to click on the refresh button actually to get it to refresh the calculation, but there it is. And that's how you can override. Now, another thing that we don't really give, I mean, there's the personal and living expense worksheet where you see all your expenses, but a lot of times people look at it and they say, and I'm going to get there right now, and they'll go to the lodging section down here at the bottom, and they'll say, well, there's insurance, there's yard service, maintenance, rent, repairs, tax, trash collection. Where does the mortgage payment go? And the answer is it goes in the asset and debt table, which I'll go there right now. It's right here, the entry table. It's already filled out, actually, and you'll see that right here at the bottom, there's the Citizens Federal Bank entry, which is a first mortgage on the marital residence. And that's where the mortgage goes. I'll double-click on it here, and that'll bring it up on so you can see more of the details, what the lien is and what the monthly payment is, things like that. Incidentally, there's no amortization table built into the spousal support calculator. So if you want to enter a party's 1040 Schedule A interest expense, you'll need to get your hands on the bank's latest interest statement. And while we're looking at the property screen here, let me mention that the table allows drag and drop. So let's say that you said, okay, let's move this mortgage, responsibility for the mortgage. Let's drag it over and put it on the defendants column, and boom, there it is. That easy. Almost fun. Not quite, but almost. Also, you may not have noticed, but when I moved that debt over, this column here, the total of went up, and because it was a debt, when I moved it over to the defendants column here, this total went down. And it does all those things dynamically. Okay, I'm going to move along. How do you close this worksheet? Right there. I'm going to move to the lifestyle form. You know, I spend a lot of time on the ITSE form, and I don't think we spend any time on the lifestyle form. And I was talking to an attorney once about the form, and he was kind of poo-pooing it, saying he didn't feel it was that important. He said that the courts didn't really weigh that too much. They basically stuck to formulas. I'm not sure I agree with that assessment, and here's why. First, when you think about it out of context, the ability to pay is what the child supports table's self-sufficiency reserve is all about. Second, and probably more directly important, the spousal support statute specifically cites the obligor's ability to pay as a mandatory consideration. I mention all this because that's really the purpose of the lifestyle page. That's what it tells you. Sure, it's a massive wall of numbers, but the only ones you need to pay attention to are the highlighted ones. Maybe not highlighted, but the ones that are in red. Let's take a look. First, what do these highlighted cells tell us? Well, ignore the left to right. Let's start at the top and work our way down. The first thing the first column actually is the amount of spousal support. So you see it here is $3,099, then it jumps up to $6,000. It just gives us a whole range. I think there's 30 different amounts there. And what this is like is an ITSE form for each of these different amounts of spousal support. What we see, though, in the red is that when it gets to $15,495, the recipient can meet just about 100% of his or her essential and non-essential living expenses. That could be important. It's good to know. Farther down, at 24,792, we see that the parties have reached after-tax income equilibrium. And that's important as well. We jump down once more, and we see that at $27,891, the obligor of the spousal support system is just able to make payment of his essential and non-essential living expenses. And finally, if spousal support increases one more increment to $30,000, the payor obligor is now at the threshold of being unable to meet his or her necessary living expenses. The point is, this is not bad stuff to know. I don't think it's unimportant, and it describes a range of potential it's easy for me to say. It describes a range of potential solutions, and knowing that range is important. I'm going to spend just a moment on how the screens are organized, and to do that, I'm going to go to the taxable income form. You're probably familiar with the tree view. At the top, all you do, you do most or all of the data entry, like in the client worksheet, for example. But as you progress, more and more of the screens complete themselves, and sometimes when you get far down, there's nothing for you to enter at all. I want to point out that in the last year or so, the IRS transformed the two-page 1040 and made it 2 pages with 3 schedules. The way the spousal support calculator handles that in terms of data entry screens is that it followed the overall organization of the tax parts of the old form, but inserts the new schedules where they would have been in the old return. The taxable income section on page 1 of the new 1041 is a good example. You are looking at it right now. It's half as long as it used to be, and the IRS took the missing half and placed it as a separate Schedule 1. Adjustments to income that also used to be at the bottom of the page 1, they are now the second part of the new Schedule 1. But for data entry purposes, even though we've identified, let's scroll down here, even though we've identified Schedule 1 and the additional income, we're keeping it kind of in the order of the original tax return. And that way, if you were familiar with the old way, you're good. If you're not familiar with the old way, we've got it organized like the new one anyway, so you can't lose on that. Now, let's go to the tax adjustments. That's right down here in the tree view. What we have is the same thing happening again. What used to be the rear side of the tax return is organized into Schedules 2 and 3. And they're all correctly identified here. But they're more in the order that the old 1040 was. So, again, it's like the first page that I showed you. It should be familiar to people who are familiar with the old way, and it's reasonably identified to people who aren't familiar with the old way but are familiar with the new way. Those two screens, they're great for data entry, but if I wanted to compare tax information in a more legible format, I would go down here to Step 7, Tax Issues, and I would click on the returns, Form 1040 side by side, and what I get is the actual 1040 line numbers and arrangement with the, I shouldn't say the husband and wife, but I should say with plaintiff and defendant, or petitioner 1 and 2, side by side. Very handy. With that, let me move on to the year-to-date button. And to do that, we want to jump back here to wages. And what this year-to-date button, see, it's the Y button up here, it's set up like a W-2. So you can get a W-2, you can enter all the information in, and that's great, but you could also have a pay stub from July, let's say, and maybe enter that information in here and say to yourself, gee, I'd like to change these into annual figures because the whole program is using annual figures. Well, of course, you can multiply each one of those by 12 or by, well, if it's in July, by 2. But the easy way to do it is just put in the year-to-date amounts and then click this Y button, and the Y button is going to say, okay, what date do you want and what's the frequency? Are these paid daily, weekly, bi-weekly, etc.? And then when you click on the convert button, what it does is it converts those numbers to annual figures. And that's pretty handy as well. The only caution I have is that you don't want to do that with the base pay and then move down into withholding, and then because when you hit that Y button a second time, you're going to re-annualize the base pay and make it quite a bit more than what it's supposed to be. So bottom line is you should be entering all of the year-to-date information in and then hitting the Y button. Otherwise, you will skew the results. Now, you know, statutory considerations, that's where is that here and down in the view, tree view. I haven't spent much time in prior videos on statutory considerations, and true to form, I won't be spending much time here, except to say that you may find it informative when looking for arguments to make in favor of or against a particular spousal support amount. What it essentially does is it goes down the statutory list of considerations outlined in ORC section 3105.18, and it correlates any pertinent factors you may have entered in the calculator screens, like the general information worksheet and the income screens and things like that. It sets it all out in a written format, covering a lot of what the ITSE form actually covers, but it also has extra information, and it has, the printout has blank lines. What is this? I didn't see that. Okay. Got to jump through the Microsoft hoops here. Wow. Anything more? Let's make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. There we go. Well, I didn't break any speed records on that with Windows. Of course, I'm using a Windows 7 machine on this, so that I don't want to be blaming it all on Microsoft and Word. At any rate, what I was going to just add, I know I was going to mention that if you were, you could make your own notes here and print it out, and that way, if you were doing oral argument or something like that, you could incorporate your own notes into the outline of the statutory considerations. Finally, we updated the county-by-county median income figures, and I always thought that that was interesting to compare my client's income to the median county per capita income. Let me see. I'm going to see if I can scroll down and show you. Yeah, here it is. Nice. I think that's useful information too. I went a little long on this video, so I'm going to stop here. And I'm going to thank you for tuning in. And I hope that something I said in this video resonated with you. And remember too, that if you get an idea and you think to yourself, by George, I wish they'd do a video about such and such, hold that thought, stick it in an email, and send it to me. You could end up being the inspiration of a new YouTube video. You can let me know that at Ernie@Puritas-Springs.com. Now, as always, I had a swell time making this video. I thank you for making it possible, and until next time, I'll be looking for you, and I wish you all the best. Take care.